we love having those guys here. Jordan, especially with his contract extension, plan to have him here for 4 more years at least. For 4 more years at least. For 4 more years at least.
The Golden State Warriors make a blockbuster trade for Chris Paul. Absolutely no one was expecting the Golden State Warriors to make a move for the Phoenix Suns' Chris Paul this offseason, but that's exactly what they did. And you know what? It was brilliant. Hey, what's happening, everyone? This is Swish. Draft night came and went with one of the most incredible updates in recent Warriors history. This is the first in a series of videos I will be making to cover all the trade and draft moves the Warriors have made this offseason. First up, the Warriors trading Jordan Poole for Chris Paul. How did this happen, and why is this not the kind of move we've seen from the Warriors in recent years? Officially, the Warriors sent Jordan Poole along with Patrick Baldwin Jr., a future first from 2030 and a future second from 2027 to the Washington Wizards for Chris Paul. I mean, this is crazy because for all the times I laughed at Chris Paul, and now he's a Warrior. Oh boy. So, about 2 months ago, I released a short video on Bob Myers' pending departure from the Golden State Warriors, and for his replacement, Golden State looked no further than its own Mike Dunleavy Jr., a former player, scout, and assistant GM for the team who was originally drafted by the Warriors 3rd overall in the 2002 NBA Draft. Dunleavy Jr. became a pro scout for the team starting in 2018, which after a year he became the assistant general manager to Bob Myers. So, for the last 4 years, Dunleavy Jr. has been right there with Bob as he's made drafting decision after drafting decision, not only watching but advising Myers on the players the team would draft. This would include players like Jordan Poole, James Wiseman, Ryan Rollins, Patrick Baldwin Jr. Notice anything similar among these players? Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. The 2 lottery picks from the 2021 draft class seem to be the 2 keepers that the Warriors will continue to develop, but a big move at the top predictably led to big moves at the bottom. Today's video is about the Chris Paul trade, however, and what this means for the direction of the Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry, and the Warriors' chances of winning a championship next year with this new lineup. So what got us here in the first place? The simple answer is that the Warriors were a second-round exit last season. Delving deeper into why this team that won a championship the year prior lost so easily, many could debate the loss of the deep bench that included Otto Porter Jr., Nemanja Bjelica, Juan Toscano Anderson, and Damian Lee, among others. One simmering issue that occurred at the beginning of the year, however, that the team just couldn't shake is the beef between Jordan Poole and Draymond Green. It's not a stretch to say that we saw this coming. I've made videos suggesting that either one of the two of Green or Poole will be gone by the end of the year, and I even suggested it would be Jordan Poole who would leave. It was the most logical move. If you weren't around when it happened, Jordan Poole and Draymond Green had gotten into a fight at the beginning of the season when Poole and Green were talking smack. Green got in Poole's face and basically taunted him as to whether or not he's about that life. Poole shoved him, and Green responded with a Superman punch to the face that knocked Poole out cold. That wasn't the end of it though. The franchise tried to keep it on the wraps, but it didn't work. The tape got leaked all over social media, which caused things to get out of hand, and for a while kept spiraling out of control. Everyone saw Poole get punched, and the team was never the same since. Now we know Poole was a Wolverine back in Michigan. Draymond was a Spartan back in Michigan State. Both these schools have a rivalry that goes back decades. I personally know people with ties to these institutions. Let me tell you, this beef is as real as it gets. It wouldn't be out of line to think that this fact might have been brought up along with Poole's money bag worth up to $140 million to send Draymond over the edge. The team floundered whenever they were playing on the road and only seemed like a championship team during home games. I thought these guys could set their differences aside and play a cohesive ball game to bring another championship to the franchise, but unfortunately, things just kept getting worse. Their record kept getting worse, and after leaving Steph Curry alone to carry the Warriors past the Kings, the team gave up entirely in the second round against the Lakers. There was no way the management was going to try to keep such a fractured team together. Bob Myers spent the last 12 years drafting and pruning these players. I doubt he wanted to be the one to rip the team apart. In comes Mike Dunleavy Jr., and the Warriors now have a roster with both Stephen Curry and Chris Paul. So, first things first, I started out the video by saying this was a brilliant move. But every move has its drawbacks. Let's start out with the obvious. The first is that despite his experience, Chris Paul has yet to win a single championship. Having spent his entire career in the Western Conference, most often overshadowed by the player he just joined in Stephen Curry, Paul is missing that one significant badge of honor. As a top player in the history of the league, winning a championship is tantamount to solidifying his legacy in the NBA. This is potentially his last shot at doing so. Why, you ask? Well, if it isn't obvious, this leads to the second point, and that is his age. Chris Paul is a ripe 38 years old. Now, while he doesn't have any plans to retire, not many players at this age remain in this league for obvious reasons. For one, the pace of the game. When you start running back and forth with young teams, you tend to lose a few steps as you get older. Chris Paul also isn't especially athletic, and he's not really known for being a scorer, although he can give you buckets. Averaging 18 points per game over his career, let's not forget that Chris Paul has been unable to stay healthy in big moments. Historically, that has been one of his biggest weaknesses, and it isn't like one or two minor injuries. We're talking major impact series against the Warriors when he played for Houston, and most lately the Phoenix Suns in this past year's playoffs. On top of that, Chris Paul is one of the most notorious chokers in modern basketball, having lost 5 playoff series when his team was up 2-0. To show how ridiculous of a stat line this is, you constantly see Steph Curry get slandered for losing a single series being up by 2 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. While 2-0 is not exactly the same as 3-1, it's a fairly close comparison, and losing that many times after being up by 2-0 is pretty concerning. So it seems like the Warriors traded a player who helped win a championship, doing well enough to earn himself a massive contract, for a player who's ready to waltz into a retirement home. Not looking good, but let's check out the positives of this Chris Paul trade. First is the facilitating. One of the biggest issues that have plagued the Warriors is the lack of facilitating on the second unit. We've seen them try and fail with players such as Brad Wanamaker and Chris Chiozza. Poole was thrust into the role as the de facto point guard despite being more of a ball-dominant combo guard. Poole is a player that needs the ball in his hands to be effective. This, as you know, runs counter to the Warriors' style of play. While Poole has shown flashes of facilitating, racking up 11 assists in a single game, the lack of consistency in high-pressure games this past year has significantly hampered the Warriors' ability to close out games. The 2022 season performance from Poole, the one that earned him that massive contract, showcased a stone-cold killer in the clutch. But 2023 showed quite the opposite. A timid player who's uncertain of what he's doing and often ends up making the wrong decision. This is where Chris Paul comes in. Yes, the second unit. While there will be instances, as it was with Poole, where the Warriors run a lineup of Chris, Steph, and Clay, the primary objective is to have a leader on the second unit. With 11,000 career assists, he brings plenty of veteran savvy that will be the perfect complement to Steph and Curry, whether on the court at the same time or after as a backup. Chris Paul, being experienced enough to be a primary ball handler, gives Steph Curry the freedom to move with increased capacity as compared to just having Draymond Green as his alternate. The problem with Chris Paul's pace and lack of ability in keeping up with the younger players could prove to be his advantage. With Chris running a slower paced game, this means the Warriors can change the pace of the game at will by slowing it down and running half-court sets. With Paul being the mid-range assassin he is, this gives the Warriors more spots on the floor from which to attack. As far as scoring goes, CP3 added 14 points per game last year with the Suns, playing 32 minutes on 44% efficiency and 38% from deep. He's one of the highest IQ players the league has ever seen, and despite not ever winning a championship, is still a player you want on the court to close out tough games, and he'll be there as long as he can stay healthy. For the Wizards, who received Poole and PBJ, they had just sent Bradley Beal, who's been their franchise cornerstone for the past 11 years, to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul. The Wizards have decided to go all in on blowing it up and starting with a bunch of young players in similar fashion to the Rockets and Pistons. With Beal and Porzingis out, they've now got Poole, Kispert, Avdija, Kuzma, Gafford, among others, to do a swell tank job for next year. Or this lower middle of the pack team could surprise us and pull a Memphis. Basically, this trade works out fairly well for all three teams. Beal gets to go to a contender, Paul gets to go to a different contender, and Poole gets to go to a rebuilding team that will see him get a starting role more suitable to his liking. Not too dissimilar from James Wiseman, who went to the Pistons with likely the same outcome. Both are high ceiling players that could end up being franchise players, something that just wasn't going to happen at Golden State. I think Poole will end up flourishing as he'll have more of an opportunity away from the drama with Draymond and lower expectations as a performer. Don't get me wrong, there is still a level of expectation by the Wizards, but the team isn't exactly expected to be making the playoffs this coming year. This gives Poole a lot of room to work with in developing into his own player. So guys, just some additional thoughts on the matter. Feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like Draymond's selfishness has not only cost the Warriors a championship this year, but also potentially a future All-Star. I won't believe for a second that this performance by Poole in the 2023 playoffs is in any way indicative of the type of player that is Jordan Poole. He's still a kid by comparison and a full decade younger than Draymond Green. While his emotion can help on the floor, it has certainly hurt the Warriors' championship aspirations. KD walked and now Poole is gone. I think Dre is on thin ice at the moment despite no acknowledgement from the team as such, but another incident and it's going to be next to impossible for the team to still maintain the same amount of leeway they've given Draymond. With CP3 in the fold, this is looking like a team built not for Steph Curry, but for Steve Kerr. We've known that this is the direction this team was headed, and Steve Kerr isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Mostly because the pairing of him and Steph Curry has been crucial to the Warriors winning championships. Either way, this will be a more veteran team come next year. Let's just hope what happened to the Lakers this past year isn't what happens to the Warriors in 2024. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. And thanks for watching. Till next time. Swish.